Okay. Call the Wednesday, January 10th.
Do you have your microphone?
Commission meeting to order.
Is your microphone on?
Oh, that would be good, wouldn't it? My bad. Is it working? Okay.
Yep.
We'll call the meeting to order. There we go.
Got it.
All right, roll call.
Roger Froman.
Charles Mulwood.
Catherine Nyberger.
Sam Solars.
Steve Gritman.
Jessica Bonniwell.
Okay, if we'd all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. I'll look for an approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Look for a motion on approval of the minutes for the November 8th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I motion to accept the
Second.
minutes of the November 8th, 2023 Planning Commission.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion pass. Minutes pass. Elections of officers again already.
Every year. I just read the bylaws.
Okay. Okay, look for nominee for the Planning Commission Chair.
Nominate you.
I second.
There we go.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I always abstain. Planning Commission Vice Chair.
I nominate, or make a motion to nominate Roger, Vice Chair.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
There we go.
And nomination for Planning Commission Secretary.
I nominate Sylvia.
So, yeah.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. No old business. Our 2024 planning issues and work plan, I'll turn it over to Mr. Gritman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Put together this summary of a few things that we expect that Planning Commission is going to end up having to deal with in 2024, based on, in a couple of cases, some recent legislation and some other issues that are going along in various places, particularly related to single-family housing. So we'll talk about a little bit about that. And then finally, one relates actually to state and federal, which is the FEMA's completion of the Wright County flood insurance program mapping that requires us to have some language reflecting the new mapping. We'll talk a little bit about that too as we get to the end. Hopefully there will be limited amounts of work for the city on that end, but one of the things just to be on the radar here. So the first item that I've got, this is of course in addition to our normal planning application stuff that we come forward with, or ideas that we need to address from a code amendment standpoint that may come up during the year, but these items are kind of a little broader topics to have a discussion of. What I thought we might try and do tonight is think about these kind of from a work session kind of a conversation, and see what your reaction is to the individual topics. If you've got particular questions you think would be worth some additional research on, and eventually we'll bring these up through the year for appropriate code language as needed. But tonight is really more kind of a discussion about questions or issues that you might find as part of each of these topics. So the first one is cannabis. I don't think this is a surprise to people, but the state's been legalizing various aspects of cannabis or cannabinoid products over the last couple of years. In 22, they actually authorized the use and sale of hemp-based THC products. Kind of a colleague of mine calls this cannabis light, and the kind of, if you think of the THC-infused gummies, or sometimes beverages that have the active chemical in them. Those were authorized by the legislature in 22. Basically, they get treated a lot like tobacco, that kind of licensing process for that. And then in 23, the legislature took the next step and legalized cannabis. And they did this in two ways. First of all is the personal use and personal possession portion of this. And that became effective this summer. Individuals are allowed to possess and use cannabis in certain amounts. There's the possession is actually pretty extensive. I think it's 2 pounds, if I remember right, of cannabis on your person. You can grow up to 8 plants at your house if you are into the ag side of it, personal ag use, that is. And then personal use is also allowed. Cities have been dealing with that aspect of the cannabis legalization from the point of view of how does it affect cities on their public properties. So on City Hall or community center property or in public parks. There's two approaches generally that get put out there. One is kind of a thinking about it from a public intoxication standpoint. The state law on alcohol does not allow public intoxication, but the cannabis law that was passed did not prohibit that. So individuals are allowed to use cannabis products, smoke them in public places unless the local government adopts some prohibitions around that. And I want to frame that a little bit. There are certain places where individuals are not allowed to smoke. First of all, anywhere, smoke cannabis that is, anywhere the Clean Indoor Air Act prohibits it. So indoors places, also some outdoor places near entrances to buildings, and school property is also prohibited by the statute. But in your public parks, not necessarily. On another public property, you would have to adopt an ordinance prohibiting outdoor smoking of cannabis, at least, if you wanted to regulate it that way. So some cities have taken the kind of public intoxication approach. Some have taken more of a nuisance smoking approach. So when somebody's smoking products in a public park, it's not obvious from any distance what they're smoking, whether it's a cannabis product or a tobacco product or whatever it may be. So some cities have said, we're just going to outlaw smoking in our public parks and not worry about what the product is. So that's one approach. Like I said, the other approach is more the intoxication side, to prohibit cannabis use in your public areas. So that's kind of the framework that's around personal use, primarily in public areas. You are not allowed to prohibit it in in private homes or on property where the owner says it's okay. But this does not venture into the business side of it, and that'll come, we'll talk about that next. That's a separate set of regulations which are still being cobbled together at the state level in addition to the local regulations. So this specifically the personal use aspect of it. And like I said, different cities are taking different approaches to this. This also, for Montrose and a lot of places in Wright County, incorporates cooperation with the county because the sheriff does your law enforcement. So having a regulatory framework that you're going to rely on the sheriff as your local police to enforce becomes part of that as well. So that's a little bit of that aspect of it. Maybe I'll just pause before we go on to the next one and see what thoughts you might have about that, and if you think there's a certain approach you want us to take or other research you'd like us to do. I will say that there's a lot of information out there available from Legal Minnesota Cities or other resources. So it won't be hard to come up with lots of background information for you on this topic. With that, any thoughts or approach that strikes you on this? I'd be happy to hear it.
Well, what about a neighbor that is having a party and they're smoking and the fumes or whatever?
There's, the city is prohibited from regulating that. They're smoking on their own property, just like tobacco. They could be smoking cigars or cigarettes on their property, and we don't have authority over that.
Whatever, the fumes and...
Yeah, really on the fire, it's a recreational fire, assuming it's meeting that, even if it's smoky.
Recreational smoke,
Yeah, right, so.
just wondering.
You know, and I'd like to see it, I mean, being a smoker myself, I don't smoke in public areas like when we're at the parks or Montrose Days or anything like that, because there's children around, people that don't appreciate it, you have to be considerate, and I'd like to see it. I know a number of cities have it where you cannot smoke on city property. Mm-hmm. Just for the well-being of the residents. I know that before any of this legislation went through, the ticket for smoking a cigarette in the city of Plymouth was more than smoking a joint.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Doesn't the local government have the authority to limit that in public places?
In public places, for sure, yes. That is an area where the local government can regulate.
Well, I think, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing we'd be happy to do too, and just because it's an easy thing and being done, is when we bring this forward for some consideration about actual code language, we'll try and do a little bit of a survey for what other Wright County communities are doing, so you have some context and try and have some coordination with the county as well to make sure your policing is going to be consistent with your code writing. So,
Can't they make a formula that doesn't smell like skunk? Can't they have it, like lavender or daisies or something?
My buddy actually did that, his neighbor smokes it. He found a roadkill skunk and threw it in his driveway. Took him a while to notice it. How would that affect then, let's say somebody's walking down the sidewalk or down the street smoking?
so that's probably the grayest of the gray areas. Most cities don't have a prohibition for walking down the street smoking a cigarette. There is statutory prohibition for walking down the street drinking alcoholic beverage. But cannabis is its own little unique niche because, like I said, the sheriff is not likely to know what it is you're smoking.
Right.
They can see the smoke, but unless they're within the plume of the aroma, they probably won't know what that is that's being smoked. So there are some cities that are taking that approach, though. They're treating it like the intoxication side, making it illegal. How well they'll be able to enforce that is the question for them. But that's.
But an authority couldn't stop them on the sidewalk like a police officer can stop someone on the highway to check if they're.
Not without probable cause, so there has to be some reasonable suspicion of a violation. Any other thoughts on that one?
I think so.
I mean, I think it's imperative that we keep in mind what we're needed to do for the Wright County Sheriff, make it code consistent, so we aren't doing one-off stuff that makes their job impossible.
Yeah.
Okay. The second side of cannabis is the business side, and that's the agricultural, commercial agriculture, retailing, manufacturing, transportation of the product itself. The state actually created 11 different categories of cannabis-related businesses, and I didn't take the opportunity to list them here, but you can find those pretty easily. And they've got micro business, macro business, transportation, distribution, those kinds of things. The city has no authority. Actually, let me start this way. The state will do all the licensing for all 11 categories of business. And the city will have no authority to prohibit those particular businesses as long as they fit with your other zoning regulations. And if they're a manufacturer, they're a manufacturer. And if you allow manufacturing, you will allow a manufacturing facility that deals with cannabis-related products. The other bottom threshold is that the city does not have the ability to prohibit sales in the community. The statute creates a tiered requirement for allowing retail sales. And then when I say sales, I mean retail. For every up from cities with a population of from 1 to 12,500, you are required to have at least one retail license allowed in your city. And then up to 25,000, then you're required to have up to 2. You can allow more than that. You're not restricted to just that 1 or 2, whatever and obviously for Montrose, that'll be 1. The state, though, will be the one that issues the licenses, and the cities will, and I'll caveat this in a little bit, the cities will be kind of registration authorities. So in the general case, the state will say, okay, this applicant meets all the licensing requirements. Then they will send the license application on to the city for a registration purpose and to verify that the particular licensee meets the zoning requirements. So they're located in a retail location, et cetera. That's the general process here. The county is working on, because they do a lot of the law enforcement for a lot of the communities, working on kind of a joint powers process that they hope to sign many of the cities up to coordinate, and the county then would be the central registration authority. So the state would send those license applications to the county, and the county then would sign off on them using the local city's zoning ordinance to ensure that they're meeting local zoning rules. So there are cities that are right now working with the county to try and figure out what that looks like and what the process is going to be, and how the multi-layered process might work for them. So that'll be one of the things Montrose will have to make a decision about, is engaging Wright County on the Joint Powers Action. But either, or regardless whether it becomes the county's or the city's regulation, the city will have to allow at least one. Now, there's a flyer to that, is that Wright County is about 140,000 population, more or less. And so at some number of licenses, which I should know in my head, but I don't, I'm maybe 11 or 12, I think, for the countywide. Once the county's met its threshold as an entire county, a local government could refuse then to accept the one that they're supposed to, once the county has hit its threshold saturation point. If a city says, no, okay, well then, if we don't have to, we don't want to, they wouldn't be required to at that point. That's still going to be part of the joint powers discussion
That's
with
the joint
county
powers agreement.
as to how that works and what the process
You
for
would
that
have
would
to
be.
buy into.
Pardon?
You would have to buy into the joint powers. Can you?
Yeah,
opt out?
the city would have to affirmatively enter into that joint powers agreement if they are interested in doing that. And there are some reasons to do that, because obviously the county is your law enforcement authority. Centralizing that function probably makes a lot of sense. And letting the county have that aspect of it is another reason to do that, just get it off the city's plate. So I'm not arguing one way or the other for that. It's just one of those things that the city will have to make a decision about. But at any point, the local government, however you structure it, will then say, yeah, that's the right place. They're allowed to sell retail cannabis products at that location. And then all the other requirements are basically going to be part of the licensing at the state. You may have read about the state's process in this. They have created the Office of Cannabis Management, which is a state-level agency. They are to appoint a commissioner, which has been a little bit of a rocky road for them doing so. They still haven't actually completed that process, but they are an active, functioning agency right now. They have kind of a agency manager, not a commissioner, but and they're trying to gear up to take over the licensing process, and it's expected in early 2025. The original legislation said January 1st, 2025. I think from what I've read, nobody really expects January 1st to be the actual push the button date. Could be, but there's still a lot of work to do to get there. So, but sometime after that date, the business aspect of things will start rolling. And there are a lot of businesses, either who operate in other states, or who are local entrepreneurs, or who are chomping at the bit to get businesses running in this in one way or another, whether they're producers or manufacturers or distributors or whatever it may be. So, so that's a little bit of background. The local decisions are going to be whether the city engages with the county on the joint powers agreement, and to decide whether there's any, there will be a zoning aspect here, because the city can adopt, and actually the legislation has some buffer rules around where retail locations can be. Can't be next door to a school, can't be, there's some distances. The city can also adopt some zoning regulations that create buffers or add some land uses, depending on how you might approach that. So as we work through that process, down the road, we'll probably be dealing with our zoning ordinance and trying to create and understand what that buffer requirement the right fit for Montrose. So it's probably worth setting that on the kind of the pause button for now, because we also expect the legislature to tinker with the law a little bit this coming session. So all of that is it's cooking, but still got plenty of cook time left. So something to look forward to, though. Probably by late '24, we'll have some pretty good handle on where all this is headed, and we'll be looking for some zoning regulation language. Thoughts about that side, or any?
Well, what about the illegal market, selling to minors? How are they going to deal with that? I mean, there's a lot of that.
There's a whole separate side of the cannabis issue that the black market that shows up or still thrives in places where it's legal, all that's still law enforcement. It's not a land use issue for us technically, although there are sometimes impacts that around all of that we need to deal with. And so I wouldn't doubt that we create, after the state gets their setup rolling and the city and the county have figured out what their relationship's going to be, and the city adopts some regulatory language from a zoning standpoint, I wouldn't doubt that it won't be too long before we start tweaking it, just because we'll see what the impacts are, whether it's legal or illegal markets, and how that's affecting your community. So it's going to be new to everybody to figure out this. It's not going to be a static thing, I'm sure. So
Do these retail licenses, I mean, would it affect a liquor store? So let's say a liquor store decides to sell THC products, would that count as the one?
the way I understand it, yes. The Office of Cannabis Management is going to take over the THC and the cannabis licensing process. So it's all going to be centralized. And so the THC market, I think, would count as the one license. And that's an excellent question, though. I probably be good to research that a little further. So that's a good question. Thank you. Let me make a note on that, actually, before I go too far here.
Was it, forgive me if you mentioned it, but was there a limit to how many?
There is not. There's a bottom limit, the bottom threshold. You have to have one, but if you decided you wanted to become the cannabis mecca of Minnesota, you could go after it if you chose to. I make no judgments.
I'm just thinking for, cities with more than one liquor store, and, if there was.
Oh, yeah, right. And there are cities that are thinking, it's a legal product now, whether we like that or not, what we think about it, it's a legal product, and our liquor stores sell liquor, and our tobacco stores sell tobacco, and these are all regulated products, and so we're not going to create any thresholds. And so that's certainly a policy approach that some communities are taking.
What about a city distributor?
City-owned, right now, that kind of crosses over in the THC question too. I know that municipal liquor is allowed to sell THC-infused products, but it's my understanding that they are not, well, let me say it this way. It's my understanding that the League of Cities does not believe it is in the law to allow a municipal liquor to also sell full-on cannabis. So, but there's a little bit of gray area in the law.
A little bit of gray area.
So the cities with municipal liquor have been advised by the league not to sell it, and since they do the insurance trust, they have a lot of sway. So, but I don't think that's a final legal opinion, but I wouldn't doubt that that's one of the things that gets clarified this session. Anything else about business aspects? All right, well, that's cannabis for the time being. We'll be talking about it over the next several months, probably more than we want to, maybe, I guess. But a lot of that is just general city administration, but it does have land use implications, so it'll be a planning commission issue for sure.
Okay.
The second item I listed here is one that is kind of popping up in a few different places in different ways. And this is related to the rental of single-family homes. And I've labeled it corporate ownership of single-family home rentals. There's two ways that this is showing up too. One is in a few communities there's been an active development, new greenfield housing development where they literally build out a single-family neighborhood with the corporate ownership of that entire neighborhood. And those houses are only available for rent. They're not made available for sale to the sale market. Woodbury is one of the most cited examples. Albertville has dealt with this as a potential development plan. There are a few others around the Twin Cities that have seen this type of development happen. And nationwide, it's a common development niche that people want to live in single-family homes, but people that can't afford to or don't want to make an investment in a particular neighborhood, but still want to live in that neighborhood. Some of this product has been created specifically toward that type of market. And if you think about townhouse development that are where people may buy in, but let's say they're snowbirds and they like the idea of a managed community, so they'll take off for however many months and know that their property is being taken care of. And that this is a single-family version of that, but specifically for rental. So that's happening in a handful of places. The other side of this is corporations that are actively buying up for sale single-family homes and rehabbing if necessary, and then putting them back out there for rental only, not reselling them, and accumulating a portfolio of single-family homes for rental purposes. So there are issues around both of those models, but particularly the latter idea raises some concern for some cities because one of the aspects of making houses available and encouraging home ownership as a local housing goal can get chewed up if there's somebody with a lot of resources buying and snatching up those homes before they're available to other buyers. And very often, those homes are the kind of the entry level, or sometimes they'll call them naturally affordable owner-occupied housing, because they naturally occurring affordable housing, NOAH, because they're the older homes that are selling for resale, maybe at higher prices than we could ever have imagined, but still below the market for new construction. So that affordable market, if it gets chewed up by corporate ownership and made only available for rent, you squeeze out a layer of potential homeowners. So that's the approach that some cities have taken anyway, as a reason to regulate corporate rental. And there are different ways to go about it. And if you decided you wanted to regulate this, some cities have limited the total number of units any one organization can own. That gets into then how do you know that this organization isn't the same as another organization, but with a different LLC name or, whatever. So there's a monitoring and enforcement aspect to that. But some cities have taken it to the point of limiting the total number of rental single-family homes in the city, just saying our cap is going to be X number of rentals, and that's going to be it. That requires you to license single-family rentals so you can keep a track on how many there are. Some cities have gone to the extent, also within the licensing realm, of licensing and then saying only X number in any one geographic area. Defining what that geographic area is probably sometimes a challenge too, but that's another way, rather so that large areas of a community can't just be bought up over time and converted to rental neighborhoods, thinking that dispersal of the rental units throughout the community, to the extent that there are some, is more important than allowing them to congregate. The flip side of all this is that rental single-family homes are important housing stock. They provide opportunities for people who do want to be neighbors and live in a neighborhood, single-family, low-density neighborhood, but maybe can't make a down payment to buy a home. Sometimes people that rent are kind of transitional residents who are looking for the right house to build or buy in the community, but this is a place to land until they can find that spot. So wiping out rental is, in my personal view, not probably a very good approach. And then whether or not you want to enter the marketplace and regulate in that marketplace that's a different policy question. So you have to understand what your goal is and try and craft your regulation to have as few unintended consequences as possible. So, but I wanted to raise this because it is a going issue out there, and there are communities that are actively studying and or adopting regulations. I want to make sure you're all aware of it and see if it's something that you are interested in pursuing, or at least following or researching, or having further discussions about, whatever it may be, your level of interest might be, so that it's something that we get on our radar in case it's something we want to do something about. Now there's a little subcategory of the single-family rental and that's short-term rental. Short-term rentals are homes that are typically owned specifically for rental short-term periods, obviously by the label. The state language says anything less than 30 days is a short-term rental. So most short-term rentals, though, are not 30 days long. They're usually more 7 days or kind of vacation type stays. And this issue tends to be more an issue for markets that have a lot of tourism or that kind of a location-based type of thing. I have not bothered to go on Airbnb or VRBO to see if Montrose has anybody doing short-term rental. There probably are a couple. There always seems to be a few. Some cities have taken a hard line on short-term rental because the problems with them tend to be people renting for party houses for a weekend, and and if that happens over and over again, it can be pretty disruptive, obviously. There are arguments in favor of having short-term rental available, so there's flips, all kinds of facets to that particular discussion. That's a little subcategory of rental, single-family overall, but another aspect of this to be aware of. If we decide to jump into this, that'll be one of the things we want to at least be talking about. So there's a lot of fingers to this one. So I don't know if you got a reaction or if there's anything.
I didn't think the state of Minnesota allowed corporate ownership in the family homes.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of corporate ownership, single family.
Well, Senator Tina Smith and a senator from California, I believe, and one from either Georgia or the Carolinas are trying to get federal regulation passed to outlaw corporate ownership of single-family homes. So,
There's a lot of, that particular issue, there's a lot of aspects to that because the states argue that the feds can't prohibit that. Zoning and land use are state issues, not federal issues. So the one area that the feds probably do have the ability to regulate is in federally subsidized housing. So they could limit or prohibit corporate ownership of federally subsidized housing, but almost certainly probably not in whether a local government decided to allow corporations to own. I'll also say that there's a lot of corporate ownership that individuals do in estate planning. So a family corporation will take ownership of a house.
that's the LLC, that's exempt.
Could be an LLC, but it could also be an actual corporation. And so, in fact, a lot of farm corporations are organized that way, so that it's a family farm corporation, and it's not an LLC, it's a registered corp.
Sure.
So,
But the Minnesota Federal Reserve stipulates that two non-residential residences are considered corporate.
that's the problem, is that the definition of what corporate ownership means, if you would just talk about corporate ownership, and you said no corporate ownership, there are a lot of corporate, I bet you, without looking, but I will bet you there are a lot of homes in Montrose that are owned by corporations, but occupied by families.
I know one particular
Yeah.
person owns several properties.
And that's the angle that cities have
And
taken.
then we repealed the ordinance regulating rental properties, which would be a rental of a single-family home too. So there's just so many comments to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of angles to it.
Things just don't make sense, they don't add up.
So, and I know that there are a lot of people who own more than two, three, or four single-family homes as a private investment. They have a corporation. Usually we wouldn't be concerned if Roger owned 5 homes and rented 4 of them in the community and had it under Rogers Housing Corporation. But we might not like it if somebody, and I'm only guessing, but some company from California came in and bought up 100 of them. So where your threshold is usually depends a lot on who the identity of the owner is, which is one of the things we can't really figure it around. So anyway, there are a lot of issues here, and that's why I raised it.
Have a housing authority representative, a person in Montrose, how are they going to deal with any of the regulations?
Well, the regulations would be you would have to decide that you were going to then license rental properties, so that you had a way of monitoring and knowing which parcels were.
One individual I have in mind, is he licensed to have, is his LLC licensed to have several homes in the city of Montrose?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't know that. We don't license single-family rentals, do we?
No, we don't.
So there's.
So right now, we don't know all of that information, so if you were to even explore some regulations, we probably wouldn't know who we're affecting, or what level of if there is a problem, what level of problem it may be. There's just tons of things we don't know about that right now. And you would be creating an infrastructure.
Right.
To get at it at all.
Rental properties as far as ordinance violations that are just overlooked.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say that your finger is on the pulse. Thank you for bringing this point up. It is going to become a major issue. A living example is the Colony Ridge going down in Texas now, where we got about 100,000 homes going into an old ranch that no one speaks English. And we have the Chinese moving in, we have other countries buying large blocks and owning all the homes and a lot of problems. But, I ran into this problem firsthand as with the Homeowners Association in California, where we had 338 units and we had an investor coming in and buying blocks of 10 at a time. And pretty soon that meant that they were a majority owner of the HOA, which meant that they then drove the entire HOA.
Do the bylaws and everything themselves.
That's the point. There's no bylaw that prevents this problem from occurring. And unless we have a zoning issue that addresses this,
Well, the
we can't institute it after the fact.
two associations that I have lived in, the bylaws have addressed renting out your unit.
Not renting, I'm talking about if they come, now you're gonna tell them what they can do with their house after they buy it? That starts becoming a very complex set of problems. This is not a simple problem to solve. I was gonna give you 2 articles. I don't know if you've seen these, but people are trying to do legislation, but,
Yeah.
and then there's the, Amazon and a bunch of the companies, Google, et cetera, and they're investing $1 billion. And, but it's the tip of an iceberg. But the place where it's really coming to a head now is down in Texas. And so, is there something we can do about it? Who knows? But it's going to require some heavy thinking. This is not a simple problem. So.
Yeah, well, we'll get it on the radar and
Yep.
we'll keep our finger on
Yep.
in the wind and see what comes of it. Because it is a growing issue and it's being discussed and dealt with in places around the Twin Cities as well. So I think we'll have a heads up before it, I think.
Solving,
What's that?
apparently Sacred Communities isn't
Oh.
solving homelessness.
Yeah. So,
It's,
and as more news comes out, and I appreciate anything that you see that you want to pass along, I'd be happy to get. And as I collect information, I think we'll have a regular update on this topic as we go along. And at some point, if we decide we want to step into it, we'll.
well, I think just the very idea that our ordinance repealing, regulating rental properties is,
Because we don't have staff to enforce that. That's why we don't have staff to enforce that ordinance, so
I know that.
that's why it was repealed, so,
And here you're looking at,
right. I mean, I guess you're gonna have to increase the budget so we can hire a few more people.
That's right.
I mean, we have 3 people that work in the office right now, so,
Things cost money.
yeah, and things cost money.
he's just giving us information.
No, I know, I'm just saying, that's why that rental ordinance was repealed.
I know.
You mentioned that a couple times, so.
All right, the easy one is the third one. FEMA completed its mapping after many, many years in Wright County, and this is floodplain mapping. So they've actually are doing it so it's digitized too, instead of just the old paper maps, which they used to have, that are many, many years old. Cities are required to have a floodplain management ordinance, And the purpose of that is to qualify affected properties for federal flood insurance. So if you have a property that's affected by flooding, your normal homeowner's insurance doesn't cover it. The only way to cover from flooding is federal flood insurance, which is very expensive. But if you don't have it, you can be devastated, exactly. So it's very important for the city to remain qualified for federal flood insurance program. To do that, we have to have the floodplain ordinance in place and our maps, or adopt the maps. In Montrose, it turns out that we only have a very tiny part of the community that's subject to the flood zone, which is way down in the south part, and it's actually part of the city's wastewater treatment property. So we're hoping that the DNR, who they manage this, it's a federal program, but the DNR water people manage this. We're hoping that we'll be able to adopt a map as basically a simple step and not have to go through the whole floodplain ordinance. I would guess that our floodplain ordinance is probably not consistent with the newer model, but hopefully it's such a minor issue that they won't require us to do that. And we'll just be able to adopt the maps, or adopt the maps and reference the map dating in our code. So we're working on that process right now. Not really anything for the planning commission to do with this, and it's not really going to be a discretionary thing. If they tell us you've got to do ABC, we'll have to do ABC. But right now we're arguing for just A. So hopefully that'll be an easy thing. We'll have a hearing at some point this year to address a very tiny piece on federal floodplain. So just something to look forward to, minor thing, but.
My 2 cents worth here, when I moved in, having worked for FEMA and having floodplain issues, rule my life for a dozen years, the FEMA floodplain map that I looked at 5 years ago that did include the edge of my property right along, because each of the water catchment basins that we have, that's considered floodplain. And the reason why is because back when Obama was running the government, now it's Biden, right? This has happened. It's now all of the floodplain stuff that was done under Obama administration, which includes, for example, a farmer because it's been reinstated, for a farmer to install a drainage tile on their property requires EPA approval because it's part of the watershed of water supply for America. It used to be governed under navigable waters. Now the language has changed to be watershed, which includes virtually all of Minnesota. Okay, because Minnesota is nothing but a watershed for eventually the Mississippi. So you end up with a lot of complexity going on in the politics. Now, it could all change after the next election. But as of now, I'll give you this as well, all right? It's a big heads up that depending on how they wish to implement the Obama rules that were instituted back then, it's a could be a big issue, because it can govern the issue of how your storm sewers are set up in your city, because that all goes into the watershed, and on it goes. I've had communities where it governed the issues as far as if you have a sump pump, where does that empty out to, and on it goes. So it hopefully it stays trivial for us, but I think that you're directly over this is a third issue that is directly over the target that could become a big issue for us. Just for what it's worth, I'm just rattling that off.
I thank you for all that information, but we are a bipartisan political.
It's not partisan at all. It is now law.
Yeah.
Okay, no, working in FEMA under Obama, it's an amazing process because the watershed of America was seized. Okay, so that is not a partisan issue at all, whatever. But it is a huge, what America is slowly coming to grips with is water rights. Because water rights is completely undefined or overdefined as of, the moment. And if you don't believe me, just go start educating yourself on the Colorado River and the water rights of everything to the west, in particular, of the Mississippi, which we happen to be, right? So, a very big set of issues.
It's a huge issue. My family, we were underwater on the Crow River. We spent months dealing with FEMA.
Yeah.
Months dealing with all of this issue that you're talking about. It's a huge issue.
Huge issue.
It's not, some of it's
Well, it's the,
not under our control.
as soon as you open the issue to say we're going to talk about floodplain ordinances and mapping, then it becomes a very different set of issues. Because this stuff that got reinstated includes all private wells in America. Okay? Reason why is because if it happens to be in a floodplain, then a private well is considered a source of contamination for the watershed, and on you go. So it can be potentially a very big issue.
It is a big issue. Yeah,
So-
our well was contaminated.
Anywho, good job.
Well, thank you.
3, directly over the target.
So I appreciate feedback. We'll be dealing with these things as we go through the next several months, and I appreciate the feedback, and we'll keep monitoring, and as we get new information, additional information, we'll keep the updates coming.
Okay, appreciate it, Mr. Gritman.
Very well done.
Do you have anything to add? Anyone else? Okay. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, February 14th, here at the Community Center at 7 p.m. I'd look for a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Give me a second. Meeting adjourned at 7:58.
We expect, by the way, the masonry business to be on the agenda in February.
Okay.
Masonry construction business.
Yeah, I was wondering what happened to them.
The Excel